Okay, so this is the final episode of the two list videos. So we're gonna start out quick with 710 tier. So 710 tier, keep in mind when it comes to like this kind of stuff. I don't really think that 610 is that much worse than 710. I don't think 710 is that much worse than 810. I think all three of them are just a little bit better than each other. Yeah. So let's get on with the first Beyblade of 710. So the first Beyblade is going to be Turbo Achilles. Now this Beyblade, it's interesting. It's definitely a balance type. It's got pretty good attack, pretty good stamina, pretty good defense as well. It has okay anti-attack. It's definitely a safe choice in limited. I feel if you put it on like Atomic or Atomic-S or something like that, maybe on OO Expand, I'm not sure. You can like weak launch this and like have a good matchup spread. Maybe on like Destroy this could work too, but I'm not sure. I think that it could have a reasonably even matchup spread and be a pretty safe choice. Though I do think it's outclassed by a couple other things that'll go too. It's not bad though. I definitely recommend it for limited. Next up, we have Spiral Treptune T4. It has good stamina and decent defense. The only reason why I think it's not any higher, if its defense was a little bit better, which I'll get to in a minute, I think it'd be the next two up, but I think as it is now, it's 710. And it's also just completely 100% outclassed by another Beyblade, which I'm sure you can guess. Next, we have Galaxy Zootron. It's kind of the same deal, though it trades off a little bit of stamina for a bit more anti-attack and defense. It's a more rounded version. It's basically if you took Turbo Achilles and nerfed its attack a little bit but gave it better stamina and defense. So yeah, it's a very safe choice as well. I'd say not as safe as something up a little bit on this list in the next two, but I'll get to that when I get to that. Its main thing is it doesn't have the best knockout defense because it's not too heavy. Next Beyblade, we have Dread Hades. I actually had this in 810 beforehand, but I changed it. I feel like it's almost there. It's a decent balance type. It has pretty good defense. It's just kind of like a ever so slightly better of Turbo Achilles, except it trades off a little bit of balance for just pure defense. Or pure weight, I mean. It has, I'd say, better stamina. But I don't know if it has worse defense. I think it has slightly worse defense than Turbo Achilles. It may be slightly better attack, but it's not a tier worthy of better attack, I'd say. It's definitely like a balance type that's more on the attack side. This whole tier is basically like balance types. It's definitely more attack oriented. I just think it is still outclassed by a couple other ones I'll get to in a minute. Next, final one in this tier, we have Twin Noctimus. Good, it has some of the best balance in the game. Great stamina, pretty good attack. Its main thing is its burst resistance isn't very good. I didn't think this was as big of an issue. I had it in 810, but through further testing, I realized it kind of is that big of a deal. It severely nerfs its attack, and if it can't stall, it may get burst by some of the Beyblades. But honestly, even with those flaws, it's very versatile. It's very good. If it had even a little bit better burst resistance, it'd probably be an 810 too. But with its burst resistance, it's hard looking back to justify it being an 810. Still a very solid choice, probably the best in this tier. But they're all actually pretty equal, so it's not the best by very much. Okay, So, on to 810 now. First Beyblade in 810. Keep in mind this isn't ordered, none of this is. I'll tell you if it's ordered. I don't want to reiterate that, but I probably should, just in case somebody gets confused. But yeah, so as I was saying, in 810, the first Beyblade is going to be Tide Treptune T3. It's basically an upgraded Spiral Treptune. It has the rubber gimmick, which can really help. It's got, I'd say, ever so slightly better stamina, better defense, burst, and knockout-wise. And the rubber actually gives it, like, slightly more outward weight distribution, which is nice, and a slightly more balanced, even shape, like on the inside, which actually gives it better opposite spin game and better balance, which I think is really nice. It tends to, like, process longer than other bays by just a little bit, which is something you really want. I'll probably end up using this as a counter pick, like a stamina, defense, opposite spin counter pick, maybe on something like 7 bearing, along with Deep K-Nox. If that's even allowed, we'll see. Next up on the list, we have Asteroid Zootron. Asteroid Zootron is basically just Galaxy Zootron, but better in almost every way. I think its burst defense maybe ever so slightly worse, and that could just be the different shape. But its stamina is better, its knockout defense is better, and its anti-attack's better. What I'd recommend is go in with something with decent stamina and decent defense, or something like that. You can go Unite, but I think it's outclassed burst and knockout defense-wise. You can go full stamina, but I think it's outclassed stamina-wise too. So go with something that's like a mix, like Atomic Touch S, Atomic Orbit maybe, and just do like a mid-launch or a weak launch, depending on who you're fighting. If you're fighting another stamina type, do maybe a hard launch. If you're fighting an attack type, do a weaker launch. But it's such a versatile layer. It's really going to be a very smart choice, because it can actually defend against some things later on in the list that I'd say are really good for attack, some of the best. If you weak launch it enough, it can survive. It has good stamina, rivaling that of K4's. And it has a chance of boosting things like Deep K-Nox, if you launch it hard enough. But yeah, it's overall a solid pick. I think the only thing I would make it top tier or better would be if it had slightly better burst resistance. That's kind of its only main thing. While its burst resistance is good, you have to weak launch it to fully get a hold of that power. Next Beyblade on the list is going to be Fafnir F3. Now, I think it definitely deserves a spot here. It's not super broken, but I feel like in Limited, it's definitely top tier, which this is basically the Limited top tier. So, yeah, definitely top tier in Limited now that Ball Cash and Surprise and Requiem and Turbo Surprise are gone. It just makes sense. It's got really good same spin stamina for Limited. It's got great opposite spin game, some of the best opposite spin game for Limited. I think it has a very ever so slightly better opposite spin game than Ball Cash, but that could be all placebo. It's got good burst resistance too. Though if met with another Beyblade, it's a little bit useless. I'll get to that Beyblade in a second. Overall, it's just your flagship left spin equalizer in Limited, which is something you really need. And it definitely fits that role really well. Next up, we have Nightmare Luna. Nightmare Luna is such a good Beyblade. It's really good attack-wise. Now, it can beat pretty much anything left spin. Even in Standard, it can beat things like Hell Salamander if you're good enough. It has a little bit of trouble dealing with Lord Spriggan if you're not good enough. You have to be really good to beat things like a Lord Spriggan. Hell Salamander is a bit easier. And then Drain Fafnir is usually no problem. Ball Cash, Ball Cash is kind of hard to deal with for some reason. I don't know why. Ball Cash against this Beyblade is just somehow in Ball Cash's favor for no reason. With Angle, it makes it almost unburstable. And 100-S gives it that much needed speed and power. It gets a little crazy, but if you can control it, it can really do some work. The only things that are wrong with it are low stamina because it's an attack type, high recoil, and it's not very good against right spin opponents, unfortunately. Next Beyblade we got is Blast Genius. So let's go over its weaknesses first, because I want to get them out of the way. Its stamina isn't very good, same spin. Its defense is only alright. It's definitely not top tier for its defensive capabilities. Attack, no way, that's a meme. It's not very good with attack. Its gimmick kind of hinders it, if anything. But it has one thing that really secures it a spot, and that is best opposite spin game in the whole game, bar none. Limited, standard probably too. Just ridiculous. Like, you could be fighting a Ball Cash on 0-0 wall bearing, and have a Blast Genius on 8- expand bearing, and you'll win 9 out of 10 times. Because it's just that ridiculous. The gimmick actually really helps it in opposite spin. I've noticed that, like, the upward waving patterns, kind of like Air Knight, are really good in opposite spin. And using, I found the combo, which I'll get into later, it's OO expand rise -H. It really takes full capitalization on the abilities of Blast Genius. The gimmick comes out more frequently. The tallness really helps with the gimmick too. And it's able to use the procession of Blast Genius to its advantage. The thing with Blast Genius is it has to be on the right setups. Some setups just aren't going to work very well. You want ones that really rely on a lot of just straight, like, not falling over, because Blast Genius is really good at not falling over for some reason. Maybe it has to do with the layer gimmick somehow changing its center of gravity just a little bit so it doesn't fall over. And the balance of Hasbro, because Hasbro bays, in my opinion, usually have better balance than the TT ones. Just because I think the plastic's a bit lighter, and mold differences are like little bits of plastic that are like slightly different. They're not gonna matter as much. Whereas TT, a lot of those things really matter because it's a heavier type of plastic. But yeah, I think if you balance check this bait, it can pretty much beat anything opposite spin on the right setup. Next Beyblade is Turbo Valtryek. Turbo Valtryek is like a right spin L3. In Limited, you can take out most things. The only things you really can't take out is if K4 is allowed, that's going to be really hard. But you can still do it if you're good enough. Z3, if they weak launch it and do everything properly, you're going to have a hard time against it. But other than that, you pretty much have most things in the game that you can beat in Limited. It's a very good attack type. It's pretty much just like the TT one, just with a couple grams shaved off here and there because of the lack of metal. The only problem I have with it is the burst stoppers don't work, and the slopes are only okay. So it does burst a little bit too much, in my opinion. But even despite that, it's still a really good attack type. And I feel like it's going to do well in Limited, along with L3. Next up, we have Deep Canox. This guy is still useful in Standard. I actually had it up in 9-10 tier for a bit. But then Wombat suggested that since 9-10 or top tier is basically going to be like all of the things that are just too good for Limited, I couldn't really put it up there anymore. Just because I don't think it's too good for Limited. It has its weaknesses. It has bad burst resistance. Which is the only weakness it really needs because it's a stamina type. But in limited, even standard, you can outspin pretty much anything in the game besides TT Archer Hercules. That's like the only thing you can't outspin. And that's only on like Eternal. You can probably outspin it on other pieces. Like you can outspin Lord Spriggan with this, like Lord Spriggan Extend Plus, Wall Bearing, Cross Bearing, OO Bearing. Lord Spriggan is just nothing compared to this when it comes to same spin stamina. You can outspin. I would recommend Sting Atomic Dash S, or Sting Bearing if you're feeling like that. But I don't know how well it's gonna work. I think it's probably gonna work very similar though. It's got a really good gimmick. The Spring gimmick actually makes it hard to destabilize, so that can actually win it a lot of battles, because destabilization, I'm learning, is such a detriment to some pieces. Like, some pieces that should be significantly better are hindered because they get destabilized or are easy to destabilize. Twin Noctimus being an example, I didn't talk about it, but Twin Noctimus is one weakness besides being easily bursted. It gets destabilized, so it really can't capitalize on that stamina, unfortunately. Though it can destabilize itself sometimes. Like, it can destabilize other people just as easily as it can destabilize. It can get destabilized. So only things that can resist destabilization can really beat it stamina-wise. And things that just have better raw stamina, like Maximum Gouda can beat it. Also, speaking of same spin stamina and all that jazz and destabilization, someone asked me about Maligna, where I'd place Maligna if it was on the tier list. And I just gotta say, I would probably put it around 6 or 7, because it almost has the same spin of Deep Canox with a little bit more defense. So it's kind of a bit of a middle ground there. Plus, it's pretty much impossible to stabilize, which is really nice, because it's thick shape. But yeah, I've been rambling. Basically, this Bay is just a pure standard type, and it can basically outspin anything in the game if you're good enough. The only problem is, it does get burst sometimes, so you gotta watch out for, like, aggressively off-balance Lord Spriggans or JJs. I'd recommend using this mostly in deck format, and it's also hindered by the fact that it can't go left spin, so it's not going to be able to outspin a left spin Lord Spriggan unless it's on a LAD setup, which is probably better used on other Beyblades. Okay, so 9 out of 10 tier. This is going to be top tier. And we're going to start off with Garuda G3. Now, Garuda G3, I had a theory that it wouldn't be very good, because Judgment, now ruling the attack meta, has its rubber blades that were just, I'd assume, since Garuda G3 is all based on having little friction, that the amount of friction caused by Judgment would just burst it one hit without, like, any way of avoiding it. But apparently, this thing can actually tank hits from Judgment in both a burst defense setting and a knockout defense setting. I tested against Blitz Extreme Dash and Blitz Atomic, and I tested Garuda G3 on Sting Unite, Blitz Unite, and Sting Atomic Dash S, and it won both battles. Now, I'm not saying you should totally risk it. I would say maybe try to go for something else, but this Beyblade can indeed deal with that, and it can outlast Judgment because of its circular shape. It doesn't lose very much stamina in the process. Plus, it can deal with Zwei too, but that's not really too important. The only problem is it gets destabilized, unfortunately, and that can actually lead to Judgment outspinning it if it gets destabilized. It's also kind of a big target. Unfortunately, that's kind of the only... Those are the two real flaws, and then it doesn't have max stamina, which... It's outclassed by Deep Canox stamina and Lord Spriggan. And just very barely turbo splicing. But yeah, this Bay can actually be a pretty good powerhouse, and in opposite spin LAD, I know I've probably mentioned this combo a bunch, but on the combo OO Expand or Rise-H, it can actually outspin, wall bearing, and extend plus in opposite spin kind of easily. Not super easily, but relatively easily. Though it can still lose. Next bay up is going to be Splice and Requiem. This bay, good same spin, good opposite spin. I'd say its opposite spin is better than its same spin. But since this bay can switch spin directions, it's a good choice if you really, if you know they're gonna go with a left spin and you go right spin, you can do that. Plus, this thing actually has pretty good same spin defense, and stamina. It's also decently heavy. It's one of Hasbro's heavier Beyblades, and it's also really compact, so you really feel that weight. I was actually able to beat a Zwei Longinus in same spin with this in a tournament setting. Like, not in a practice match. This is against Thug Testing, and I was able to beat him in same spin. It's really hard to burst, at least decently hard to burst, though I think its recoil, it's not too much recoil, but the little axes, the head of the axes, like the gold tips, kind of make it more recoily than Gouda G3 or K4. And that hinders it a little bit, but overall, it's a really versatile bay. Good defense, good stamina. This is for limited, or for standard. This is definitely banned and limited. So unfortunately, I think it's outclassed just because weight-wise, it's definitely not. It's still a God Bay, keep in mind, even though it's one of the higher-weighted God Bay out there. I still think it's a good choice if you don't really have too much other from Hasbro, or you don't have some of the 3 Beyblades I'm about to mention in a little bit. Yeah, this is a good choice. Plus, this can actually replace both K4 and B3 if you only have this Beyblade, which is really nice, because since it can switch spin directions and go both left and right, it's a very solid choice. Next up, speaking of the devil, we have K4. This bay, great burst resistance, on par with the G3 actually, maybe even a little bit more. Great defense. It's a smaller target than Gouda G3, but it has slightly less smoothness. It's not completely round. Great balance, great weight distribution. I'd say it's got pretty good stamina. I think the 3rd or 4th best for Hasbro. Its opposite spin game, though, is really good. It's good at opposite spin defense. This can also handle Judgment in same spin, and Zwei, obviously, in opposite. Unlike Unite, it's just basically a less wide, like G3, with less stamina and more burst defense. But yeah, it's also really good in opposite spin. I wouldn't say as good as Blast Genius or G3, but yeah, definitely really good in opposite spin. Next up, the bay you've all been waiting for, Bulkash B3. This is, again, getting trumped by a Splizen. In the last 2 lists, it was second to Legend Splizen, who at the time could switch spin directions and just basically beat everything that's not attacking the game for free. Stupid, I know, but pretty cool. This bay can basically beat anything right spin that's not like a Judgment, and even then it has a good, decent, not the best, but a decent matchup against Judgment. If you're good enough, if you're a slippery enough snail, and RNG's on your side, you can definitely beat a Judgment. Though unfortunately, it has a kind of low weight, unfortunately. It has a really smooth shape, which kind of helps with recoil. But if you're up against a Zwei, this bay is light enough that it'll take enough recoil damage per hit that it'll get outspun or knocked out pretty easily. But in that sense, it's a bit of a glass cannon, though keep in mind it is ridiculously hard to burst. I'd say on par, if not better than Lord Spriggan. It's all about situation, like does Lord Splizen have, or Lord Spriggan, does it have a painted disc? Do you have a tighter bearing? Do you have a tighter B3? All those things matter. But yeah, definitely worthy of the number 2 spot. So if that's number 2, what's number 1? Number 1 is going to be Turbo Spryzen. It's basically everything you'd want in top tier. It has great same spin stamina, rivaling that of G3, and it can be in both spin directions, mind you. On the combo, OO, Expand, Rise-H, it can outspin Lord Spriggan, Extend Plus in both same and opposite spin. Somewhat consistently, it's hard. You have to get the launch right. Unfortunately, it does self-KO a little bit if you're not careful. And that's kind of the main problem with using Hyper Speed drivers in general. They get self-KO'd a lot, just because they're very fast. But with that combo, I actually found out something that I like about the Hyper Speed drivers is each one has a unique frame that it can go with. Some go without frames, some go with lower frames, some go with taller frames. For example, Rise-H is really good on Expand, yet Linear is better on Cross, and Jaggy is better on Nothing. Jaggy is probably the best for pure lad. Procession-wise, I think Rise-H is the best. And then Linear is a bit of a mix of lad and procession. But yeah. But if that's not your fancy, you can beat both Zwei and Judgment if you choose opposite spin on Unite, and they don't have, like, Atomic or something like that. You can beat Judgment same spin, but it is hard because even though you have the burst resistance of, like, K4, you also have, a little bit more recoil, even though it's more defensive-y shape. And you have the burst outbursts, which help. But even still, sometimes it can get burst, and it may get outspun just because it'll get slowed down a little bit more. So this bait, keep in mind, is like 17 grams, and it definitely has the weight to compete on a higher level than most of the other things. Plus, again, switching spin directions is integral. This Beyblade is very versatile too. As I mentioned, it has defense setups, it has really good stamina setups. Attack, not so much, but you don't really need that. You don't really want to go attack just because most people rely on knockouts, and you can just get RNG knockouts with like Rise-H anyways. But yeah, you can use Octa if you want decent chance at beating most things. You can do decent in same spin, decent in opposite spin, and decent against like Judgment as well. If you want just pure opposite spin, you can go OO Wall Bearing or OO Dimension-S, which you may not want, unfortunately. If you're going to do opponents, this bait is about as good as Spryzen Requiem, maybe a little bit better in opposite spin, maybe a little bit worse too. It's around the same level, so it's not like you're really trading much by going with this instead of Spryzen Requiem. It can also go pretty same spin with the Rise-H combo, and if you don't have that, Sting Atomic-S, Sting Bearing, those work too. And I think Hasbro kind of buffed it a little bit by not having the metal there. Sure, it reduces its defense because of the weight distribution is less centralized, but it now has more outer weight distribution, which gives it better stamina. But yeah, I hate to reiterate, just definitely the best Beyblade, in my opinion. Thank you guys for watching this episode. I will see you in the next video. Don't forget to check out the WBL post. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.